We are live. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another edition of Respect the Craft. This is episode number 152. And I'm joined here by the Messiah of old school. He's an honest vet, Mr. Shawn Donavan. Good evening, sir. How's it going?
Good evening. Thank you. And pretty cool intro and graphics you got. It's nice to be on something very professional.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. No, thank you again for joining us here. This is the conversation I definitely wanted to have. So I'm glad we can finally have it here today.
Appreciate you having me, and hopefully we'll make it a good one.
Hopefully so. So before we get into the questions, I want to ask you, I have to ask you the question I ask everyone that comes on. You heard the name of the podcast. So it's called Respect the Craft. When you hear that term, though, the craft, what does that mean to you?
When I hear the word craft, I mean, it encompasses everything in the sport of professional wrestling. It's respecting the heritage first and foremost of where wrestling came from, and the reason why we're here at this point, whether you're a fan or you're an individual inside of our industry. That's one, thing that kind of sticks out to me when it comes to respecting, the craft itself. The second part of that is if you are a performer, it's respecting what we do inside of a wrestling ring. There's so many written and unwritten rules in our industry that hopefully, we'd like everybody to be taught the right way, but unfortunately not everybody gets the opportunity to learn from seasoned individuals, or those that may have as much time in professional wrestling as those that, brought me into the industry. But on the flip side too, as a fan, respecting our craft as well. You see it today on social media. I mean, I hate to say it, wrestling social media is like a house going up in flames, there, and not to say that no one is entitled to their opinions, because they are. Just some of the opinions that are out there are just pretty outlandish and pretty outrageous. I wish we could get rid of wrestling social media altogether and just go back to watching the industry as a fan, like the way I grew up with, where there was no spoilers or none of this and that. You would just watch weekly episodic TV and you would enjoy what's on your program, and you couldn't wait to watch what was happening the next. So those are kind of things that come to my mind when I hear the word craft. So
Gotcha. And no, and I could definitely agree, as much as I know it sounds a little opposite of me having the podcast here, but I have to agree that sometimes social media does make it like it kind of ruins it. I always say guys like Timothy Thatcher and a lot of the ones that just completely don't use social media, I think they're doing it right now. Just let it just be the sport that it is, and allow all the negativity to just stay on the side.
Yeah, I can honestly say I don't nearly spend as much time on social media as much as I used to anymore. Not necessarily just due to wrestling, social media, but it's just social media altogether. There are parts of it that are very interesting, and there are parts of it that are great. But I feel like a majority of it today, unfortunately, I hate to use the word, I feel like a majority of it is very toxic.
No, and it's true, definitely. And again, just I can agree with you there. Not just wrestling social media, but just as a whole, it almost feels like that's all you see a lot of the time is that side of it. That's what gets pushed forward, and unfortunately, a lot of people like to add to it instead of trying to make it a little better.
Well, hopefully, those of us that are doing it right, will kind of bring it right back to the forefront. Again, everyone's got a right to have their opinion and stuff like that. But sometimes I think as a whole for our industry, I think we all just need to kind of settle down and just remember, that we're all, at the end of the day, even individuals that are in our industry, we're all still fans of the industry. So let's just enjoy it as fans and not get too wrapped up into it too much. I think some are so worried about the inner workings of what goes on in the industry that they forget that what we're supposed to be watching is supposed to be fun.
And that definitely, I feel like, it nails it right there. It loses almost the fandom of it all. Like, there's a reason why everyone's doing it. Like, they have that love for it. Or at least that's what it should be about as well. That's what we all got into, wanting to be a part of this as well. But let's get into that a little bit now. Let's get into what got Shawn Donavan into wanting to get into the business, instead of just the love, where the love came from, but more of what made you decide, you know what, I want to be a part of this as well.
Yeah, I mean, I can remember as far back as being a young child watching it with my grandfather was how I actually got into watching it as a fan. I remember, I would sit and play with my toys. I think I was like 4 or 5 years old, and my grandfather, he passed away unfortunately when I was 5. So I didn't have as much time with him as I would have liked. But he came off the boat from Italy, and at that time in the late 70s, early 80s, I know I'm dating myself with my age at this point, but he had a love like every other person from Italy for Bruno Sammartino, and that was the go-to. He was the, I hate to say it, he was the messiah of wrestling at that time. So
Yeah.
that's how I fell in love with wrestling, how I got into it. But it wasn't until I was older that led me into really thinking I could do this. I was probably in my mid teenage years when I discovered independent pro wrestling through my brother-in-law's brother, who was a big wrestling fan at the time, and he was going to these local shows with a gentleman. His name was Brett Schwann. He was one of the first to have, like back in the day, the independent wrestling hotlines. It
Oh,
was
okay.
called the Wrestling Clothesline, hosted by Brett Schwann. And through them is where I started going to independent shows, is actually where I first originally met Chris Candido and a number of other individuals. And, seeing the guys, when you're so used to watching it on TV and you're seeing that these characters they're larger than life, you think that there's no way I can ever do this. These guys are huge. And then to go to some of these independent shows and see that, wow, some of these guys are no taller than me. They're not that much bigger than me. Maybe I can do this. And, it was through some different networking where I found the training school that I ended up training at. And, the rest is history.
Gotcha. So from that moment again, you get into there. What would be that moment that made you decide now I'm sticking to this? Like this is the right path I want to go to. How do we
Mhm.
get the growing from this picture right here
Oh
of a
man,
young Sean,
you're doing
a young
you're
Sean
doing
there?
your research there. That is probably, I think, if I know that picture correctly, that was probably from my third or fourth match ever.
Okay.
It's one of the few pictures that I have. It's funny, I get, sidetracking for a quick second. There was no social media, no camera phones back in 2000, 2001. So everything was taken, by photo, by camera and stuff like that.
Yep.
So I don't have as many pictures from the early days as I probably would have liked to, also because we were also taught back then as a different industry, don't take pictures because you're a mark and things of that nature. But yeah, so what made that transition for me was, when I made that connection to finding that school, I didn't have the money at the time to join. I was working 2 jobs. I was going to school. One job I was working for my family. Another I was working for a local place inside of a mall. Just trying to save up some money. And the school that I was joining had a 1-day fantasy camp where they took in, I think it was like 12 to 15 people at the most, and giving you just like a little bit of a 1-day tutorial of what it's like to be a pro wrestler. And they said that the person who finished first would receive training. And I'm like, oh, this is definitely my way in. I'm gonna nail it. Of course, I haven't picked up a weight, and God knows how long. I was the overweight, out of shape kid when I was in school. But again, that confidence was there. So I went into it, and I would like to think that all of my years of consistently watching wrestling and burning out VHS tapes from Blockbuster would lead me to think that I could be a pro wrestler. And I did fairly well. I mean, when the camp ended, one of the owners, his name is AJ Sparks. I'm actually still very close friends with him to this day. We still talk every now and then, but I remember he came up to me and he said, hey, you came in second, you didn't come in first. So by the rules, I can't offer you free training, but you did really well in there. So what I can do is offer you tuition at half price. And I don't even think he got the word half price out of his mouth before I cut a check for a deposit. And I think I started training about a week or two later. And I got to tell you, I took that first bump inside of that wrestling ring and I wanted it more than anything I ever wanted in my life. Now, years later, I look at it and I see so many individuals that walk through doors of schools that I train at most recently the school that I help train at now. And unfortunately, they sign up and they take that first bump, and for some, they realize that it's just not for them. And that's totally okay. Doesn't mean you can't do something else in the industry, but usually once you take those first couple bumps and learn to hit the ropes, you'll decide real quickly whether or not you want some more of that pain, or if it's not for you. But that was my journey and how I got started.
Gotcha. No, definitely. Again, that's why I like to do my research to try to find the earliest picks I can. So I was like,
Man,
okay, let's try to find
oof,
the how we can evolve here
yeah,
into the Shawn Donavan we know now. So
appreciate that. I'm a fresh-faced, baby-faced 21-year-old in that photo. So, man,
hey,
seems
again,
like
but
a
no,
lifetime
again,
ago.
it shows though. That's why I love to talk about the evolution of it though, because that shows though how much season time you have in the business. Again, that's going,
Yeah.
if you said 2001 around there, so that's going over 2 decades of experience. So
Yeah.
that's an amazing feat to hear. So I have to ask, with that, what
Mhm.
kept you going though? Because that feat alone, to get 20 years and to still be doing this, and I've
Mhm.
gotten to see a lot of your work even recently, and it feels like you haven't missed a beat. So what has kept you
Appreciate
going with that and making you want to continue in this industry as well?
I think it just comes from a passion perspective, you know what I mean? I think it's digging deep, and for anybody, it's whether you're in pro wrestling or in business or anything, I think it's just digging deep and finding what your true love and passion is, and kind of realizing, like, and I hate to say this, why you were, kind of put on this earth a little bit, to do certain things you do. I mean, I always say you got to have a couple screws loose to do what we do, to throw your body around on a thin padding and, plywood and steel beam and do this. But that's the number one word for me still at this point in time, is still passion. I mean, I still have a passion for getting inside the ring. I have an even more of a passion now for teaching and bringing up the newer generation, and really giving them a lot of the tools to go into the industry as young as they are now, with more ammo than what I was given when I was being brought up. Because when I came into the industry, I had some really good teachers, but I also had some that were still of an older generation mentality of, I'm going to give you just enough to get by, but I'm not going to give you all the tricks and all the tips that I know. Because at that time, uh, and I hate to say, maybe even some guys still today, but at that time, guys were really hell bent on still holding on to their spot, and they felt like if they gave too much information, that you would overtake them and take their spot and things of that nature. To me today, I don't think with that mentality. I give you every tool you need to get ahead, because at the end of the day, it's my name on the line that you're breeding. So if you don't go out there and do the best that you can, my name's on that dotted line of, if you speak my name, that's where your reputation comes from. So but for me, I think that's the huge passion for me going forward now. I mean, obviously there's only so many years as a performer you can continue to do this, until your body starts to tell you you've hit your bump card. But I still want to continue in the industry. I love teaching. I love giving back. I love helping out on shows behind the scenes, doing, coaching work and agent work and stuff like that. So, as long as I'm still breathing, I'm always going to be a part of this industry, because it's just so fascinating. And I always continue to learn something new from somebody every single day. So our industry, like any other industry, you never stop learning.
Oh, definitely so. And I love that perspective of it, because I feel like, unfortunately, especially when you hear the past generations, you hear that mentality of how they were taught. That a lot of trainers back in the day were more, yeah, they didn't want to lose their spot, even though again we should want to have the business continue to thrive and continue to grow. Like I love
Agreed.
your mentality of wanting to make sure that next generation is better off as well, and especially that it is a representation of what you are teaching in there. So
Right. I mean, if you
that's
look at
awesome to hear.
the age old, yeah, the age old adage is, leave something better than the way that you found it. I found it, and the industry was not as thriving in the early in 2001 when I started. I mean, when you look at that time frame, and I have had the conversations with a number of my colleagues that started around the same time. We got into the industry at the worst time, because at that time there was only one place to go. ECW had folded, WCW got, eaten up by WWE. So there was really only one game in town. So there wasn't as many places to go. And, people look at it today, and I'll just look at the Northeast, right? If you look at the tri-state area, there's a plethora of independent wrestling promotions in every state with shows going on every weekend. When I started, there were not that many independent promotions in either one of the states. I mean, I look at New Jersey alone, if I can remember back, there were maybe only 4, maybe 5 or 6 independent promotions that were running shows. That's a huge drop number from what's going on today. So we didn't have as many places to work. So we really had to seek out and really find where to work. And that was looking at things through the back of like PWI magazines and looking at results and then looking at the upcoming shows. And then, you'd find the address to those shows. And if you didn't, internet was at its infancy at that time. So, you either had to find a mailing address and send a VHS tape with your resume printed out on the back of an 8x10, hoping that the promoter will look at it, or you would drive to that show and take a chance on yourself to help set up things and hopefully meet the promoter and hand them your envelope and see if they would, use you, or give you an opportunity at that time. So it's very interesting to see the evolution of our industry, but it's also kind of fun to look back and think how different the industry was over 20 years ago.
Definitely. And again, I feel like that's something I would hope, at least, especially for workers nowadays, that they take that into consideration, how much we have more availability now. Like you could legit do one of these and it's like, well, now I know what shows are going on this weekend. And
Right.
it's everything's up to our basically our fingertips at this point.
Yeah, it's true. The evolution of our industry is absolutely incredible to what you have at your fingertips this day. I mean, I can go back as far as remembering. One of the things that I think helped me really stand out a lot. I mean, I joked earlier about burning the VHS tapes at Blockbuster, but I remember, early in my career, I was always told that you need to study, study, study. So, what I did was I went out and I remember this is when DVD burners were starting to become a thing. And I'm still dating myself at this point, but I went and I think I literally found every Coliseum home video of WWF and every Turner home video of WCW that I bought off the early days of tape traders or the early days of eBay. And I remember converting everything over to a DVD, so it was easier for me to use because VHS was going out of style.
Yeah.
And referee Sean Bennett, who's a good friend of mine who works for WWE, when the WWE Network came out, he would always constantly rib me and joke. He's like, "How's your DVD collection doing at this point?" But
Well, again,
again,
even that shows now it's even easier to be able to do tape study. There's no excuse now to be able to not watch some sort of the product, especially with the Peacock now being a thing, IWTV, Fight TV,
right.
the Premier Wrestling Network. Now everything is again at our fingertips to be able to study so many just amazing matches on
Yeah.
there.
And it's incredible, but I said between YouTube, the Peacock Network, Daily Motion, just clips that you'll find searching through social media sites, you'll be able to find so much knowledge that's out there. Quick shout out, I see on the chats here. Quick shout out to Pete Rosato, who said if somebody sent me a VHS tape today, that would likely be an instant booking. Well, I guess Pete, you must have gotten my VHS tape, so we'll leave it at that.
There you go. Shout out to Pete, who they just announced their next show as well for We Are Wrestling. So shout out to him doing that. And also our good buddies Wes and Kyle in the chat watching, always showing support. Thank you guys for always showing love here. So I do want to talk about that though, because we talked about your coming up in that, but now I want to talk about you getting to train that next generation as well. And
Sure.
how has that been for you? How has that been to be able to now be that imprint on the next generation of stars that we see in the business?
It's absolutely incredible. I never thought, in my wildest dreams of, if somebody told me 5 years ago that I would get into coaching, I probably would have said, no, I'll wrestle forever. I haven't, not gotten into that. And then, when I joined working with Wrestle Pro back in 2017, and I started coming to train at the school, get the reps in, things of that nature, and that kind of segued over to me kind of just helping here and there, and then it just quickly spiraled into teaching, and it's been very, very fulfilling watching and helping this new generation come up. I mean, I have an elite class of people there to help train people. I mean, you've got LSG, who is, world traveled and still doing his thing, and he's really on the up and coming, and really making a huge name for himself. Along with another talent that's been at WrestlePro for a long time by the name of Bobby Wayward. He's been there forever. Phenomenal technical wrestler who brings a different style there. And then you have the sprinkle-ins, when Kevin Matthews is there, he's sharing his knowledge. Of course, the owner, Pat Buck, who's done amazing things with WWE and now AEW, sharing his knowledge. When Danny Moff pops through the door, he's given his knowledge. And then the networking that all of us have of guys that just, come by the school and help lend their knowledge to our students. And I'm learning in the same regard. Pound for pound, I think we are one of the best schools in the country. And this is not me taking a shot at any other company or any other school, because there are so many great schools out there. I say that with pride and love for our school, with the amount of reputable individuals that walk through our doors. I do think we have a great training school. And again, there are so many great training schools that are throughout the tri-state area. Anybody can go to. But again, it's very, very fulfilling for me to be able to pass along that knowledge. And then, the same thing when I'm on events, when individuals ask me to watch their matches and give them some feedback, I'll always gladly do that. And sometimes I'll just watch the matches in general because I want to know what the crowd's reacting to. That sometimes I'll just end up watching a match and, giving a few pointers here and there. But I always say I can learn something by watching somebody else's match, and you'll never, one thing you'll never hear me do when it comes to critiquing a match is I will never, excuse my French, I will never shit on a match. I will always point out what are the things that I thought were done great, what were done right, what were done wrong, and what was done pretty well but can be improved upon. And we're all here to learn from each other at the end of the day. I know, again, very differently from my past. When I've asked individuals to watch my match, it's been pretty brutal feedback, but I took the feedback in stride because I understood the way that their feedback was given, and it was done in a way to kind of like lift me up in a way, but very hard times.
Yeah, it's a hard way to learn. It's that tough love, but it's to, I guess it was the attempt to make sure, hey, you take it humble and you keep going with it. It pushed you to keep going. And I would say that was a tweet of yours that I saw the other day that definitely it resonated. I feel like that's a lost art a lot of times of especially newer workers wanting to ask for that feedback as well.
Right.
I feel like they forget that to use that vital tool of if you have a veteran in the locker room, again, if they have the time to watch it, just to ask, hey, if you have any thoughts on what I just did, and getting actual feedback as well, not just the, oh yeah, it was good, like actual breakdown and some notes on it.
And even today, I still love asking for feedback. I love asking some of my other colleagues to watch my matches and giving me that brutal feedback. And, I think one of the things, I just wrestled Fred Rosser recently. He and I came up in the industry together. He started a year after me. So it was really fun to come full circle and work him in a match. And again, even though we have the same time frame in wrestling, obviously he's gone on to do some incredible things and work for some incredible companies. That after our match together, we sat down and we broke the match down, and we really talked about what we liked about the match, what we thought could have been better. I'm asking for advice on what he thinks I could have done better from his perspective. And, I think at that point in time, no matter what kind of performer you are in terms of your years of experience, you can always benefit from using that feedback from other individuals.
Definitely. Again, it helps, and not only to be able to learn from that, but also, again, to be able to become a better performer at no matter what stage of the game you are in the business. So that's great. So I wanted to see where I take. Okay. So we're going from your training style to be able to help that breed, but also you are known, like I mentioned that tweet, to post those tweets like that. That's why in the intro, I use that, the honest vet. What made you want to put out those tweets? Like I can't wait to see one of your tweets. Like I have it pinned to make sure when you tweet something, the notification is there. Like it's always a great thing to see. What inspired you to do that?
I think for me, it was, when you learn how to use social media as a valuable tool, I think one of the things that I always lacked was Twitter. I was always trying to find my niche with Twitter, and it seems like Twitter is always a niche audience of certain things. And I just remember one day I was looking through some different news articles and stuff online, and I always remembered my mother used to read these articles called Dear Abby. That was always in the newspapers, and just I don't know what it was, just a light bulb in my head clicked, and I was trying to find my niche with Twitter, and I just said one day, I'm like, okay, dear, it's almost like a love letter in a way,
Yeah.
dear indie workers, and it's just something that came to my mind about something that I saw at a show. And for whatever reason, it just the one tweet picked up a lot of steam. So I'm like, okay, this is pretty cool. I don't think I've ever had this much interaction on Twitter. Let me try it again. And I just, but I wouldn't necessarily sit there thinking about what to write. Usually it just comes from something that I see, something that I hear when I'm at an event, or something that may have sparked a conversation, or something that somebody may have posted online that just kind of pops into my brain. And that's just kind of where it came from. But I also was looking to use Twitter from a different perspective too. Obviously, us as performers, we're character based, and obviously, you're there to promote your brand on all three platforms. But I wanted to use my Twitter in a different light, and not necessarily in a negative light. Just kind of sharing advice and tips with our industry. And I'm sure it's a lot of advice that many in our industry already know about, but maybe there are some that maybe weren't taught that stuff. As I mentioned earlier, sometimes maybe people aren't, students of the game aren't taught certain things at their school. And one of the things that I try to bring very realistic tendencies to the students at our school is making sure that we teach them the outside etiquette of our industry. And just how things work and how things go. As I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of unwritten rules in our industry. So that's kind of just me kind of just freestyling, just trying to bring some of that advice to the page. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. As we mentioned earlier in the interview, sometimes you'll have those individuals, what I like to call the keyboard warriors that have to
Yeah.
throw their 2 cents in, or try to make light of certain things that are whatever, and that's okay. Those are their opinions. It's everyone's entitled to their opinion. At the end of the day, I'm not trying to rile any feathers, but sometimes the stuff that I put out is just plainly speaking what the truth is, and obviously some cannot handle the truth. But it's not meant to be, my Twitter's not meant to be anything negative. It's meant to promote events and just shed some light on our industry of things that can be used as a positive.
No, definitely. And again, that's something like we talked about earlier. That's a perfect way of, again, not adding to use the toxicity there, but adding some positive light to it and making it so it is a vital tool. Because that's what I always
Yeah.
feel like, especially with our business, that's one of those where you're able to use it as a true marketing tool and just as a
Right.
vital tool as well to spread that awareness and spread some things that again could be used very, very much in the business. So
Yeah, that's my aim for using my wrestling Twitter, is really just to get some valuable feedback across, and just kind of seeing where the interaction goes with it. A lot of times it gains a lot of traction, and sometimes it doesn't, and that's totally okay too. I'm not one of those that's sitting at the edge of my seat, looking and counting how many likes and interactions. I'm not one of those individuals. I really don't have the time of day to really care that a post of mine got 50 likes or it got 500 likes. I mean, hey, if it got some traction, that's great. If it didn't, I'm totally okay with that too. I've got a real life to worry about. So
gosh. And again, it definitely does gain that traction though, and it shows with who's taking that advice. Like, especially there was one tweet that I was like, okay, so I have been doing this somewhat the right way when you talked about podcasting and the picture
yes.
tweet that you posted, and I was like, okay, cool. So it's not crazy to want, because it's usually I've done it a lot when I'm doing graphics for companies. I'm like, hey, can I get an
Hmm.
updated image? But for the podcast, I
Right.
took the same instant because I
Approach.
was like, I'd rather use an approach to it to make sure that it does have the most updated look, because you would hate to be like, okay, yeah, let's use this image. They haven't looked like that for like 5 years. Like
Yeah, I
it
mean, that,
just
that image you showed of me from 2001 be
oh, there we go. Are you good? Can you hear us?
I can hear you, but I can't see you
Okay.
now. I don't know if that matters, but
No. Uh-oh. Well, we can see you, so as long as I guess if you could hear us, that works.
all right.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, the image from uh 2001 you were saying?
Yeah, I was saying it'd be pretty interesting if somebody found that image and decided to use that on a poster or a podcast piece. That'd be pretty funny.
Yeah, no. Again, that's why even at that I was like, no, let me make sure we get something updated so that way, cool, we have the graphic here for the actual podcast cover and all that. So I always like to make
Appreciate
sure it's the most updated, so that way we have something, or especially if it's
that.
someone that I've seen around. Okay, let's make sure we get the proper graphics and all that done. But
There you
let's
go.
let's keep it going here. So now let's do a little bit of promoting as well. Let's make sure we let people know next
Hmm.
time they can see you, which is coming up July 22nd is going to be for
Hmm.
Shore Store Pro Wrestling here. It's going to
Yep.
be actually the day after my birthday. Crazy enough. So there you go. It'll be wrestling against Yosifer L there. So talk to us a
Yeah,
little
he's
about this. Are
actually,
you familiar with
yeah,
Yosifer's work as well?
Yosifer, I am. Yosifer is one of the students from our Wrestle Pro, Creative
Oh,
Pro New Jersey school who's been at it for the last couple of years, and he's really starting to make his way around the independents. He's got a very unique character, something that is very barbarian-esque out of, the early days of the world. So very familiar and looking forward to mixing it up with one of my students.
oh, that's awesome. Again, that adds another element to it now that it's going to be a nice test for Yosifer as well to get in there with you and see how he can hang with his teacher there. That's great. No, actually,
Absolutely.
now that I remember, I actually got to call one of Yosifer's matches at Project Codename Wrestling a while back. So that was a good time to get to see his take on this character as well that he's coming into.
Awesome.
So that's awesome there. But also, just announced earlier today, let's get this out of the way as well.
Mhm.
WrestlePro announcing their return to Rahway on September 17th.
Yep.
Tickets coming soon as well. And that also will be streamed on Premier Streaming Network. So, guys, make sure you go follow WrestlePro as well. Stay up to date with all things that they're doing because some huge things as well. So, stay up to date as they'll be doing Sunday Light on September 17th. So,
Yeah,
but you
and
guys are
I have some other dates coming that haven't been 100% confirmed yet, but one that did get confirmed today, and I know Pete Rosado's part of that is I believe it is September 8th, Friday. We Are Wrestling returns, and I will be a part of that event as well. So that was just confirmed today, but I do have some other things coming up in the month of July and August that I'm just finalizing with. So be keep on hold for that. I'll be announcing some more stuff soon.
Gotcha. Just to make sure you guys are able to stay up to date with that, go follow Shawn Donovan as well. We'll plug that now so that way they stay up to date with that. Go follow him on his social media so you stay up to date with all things Shawn
I
Donovan there.
appreciate that very much. And shout
No,
out to
no
Pete.
problem.
Appreciate the opportunity with working with We Are Wrestling. So
Definitely. I'm glad to see it back. And I know me and Pete have been talking a while about when he's going to be returning. So great that the show has finally been finalized here. So September 8th, they are back with Deja Vu. Definitely go follow We Are Wrestling to stay up to date with all things with that event coming up as well. So now let's
absolutely.
talk about this because this is definitely something I wanted to ask you about and just
Sure.
hearing your thoughts on and just what the experience was getting to be a part of the very famous Crockett Cup here with a man I
Sure.
know you're I definitely am not a stranger to, neither are you, with
Right.
Bayonne badass himself, the King of the North,
Nope.
Danny Moff. You guys bringing
Yep.
it back together there with Sent to Slaughter.
Yep.
How was that experience for you? Getting to be a part of the Crockett Cup, getting to be a part of the NWA.
Absolutely surreal in a way because when I grew up watching wrestling, I was lucky enough in the area that I was in with whatever type of cable or TV package that my family had back when I was a kid. Not only did I get WWE on TV every week, I also got to experience NWA, which then turned into WCW. And, as I grew into the industry and studying the industry more, the more I fell in love with the NWA product. It was just a different product. It was real to me. It was wrestling the way it should be. So to be able to be a part of those three letters and to be a part of the Crockett Cup and to be, when you think of how many great performers are out in the industry and how many tag teams are out in the industry that, Danny Moff and I were selected as one of 26 teams to be a part of that tournament was an incredible opportunity. It was an incredible couple of days to be a part of their brand there and seeing how their production, how everything works, and obviously getting to work with the opponents that we had in the first round. Unfortunately, I took the pinfall on that one. Flip Gordon caught me with a flurry of offense and was able to pin me and move their team on to the next round. But incredible opportunity all around. It was incredible to team up with Danny again, which we hadn't teamed since he had originally been signed to Ring of Honor back in 2019. So it was really fun to be able to put the team back together, and hopefully we'll be putting that team back together a little bit more going on in the future, and seeing what we can bring back to tag team wrestling on the independent scene.
I was gonna ask that because again, it was good again to see you guys back together again. I was gonna ask, is there a chance we would see another run of Sense Slaughter? Because I feel like when you guys first initially got together, it was just a dominant run, winning
Yeah.
championship after championship after championship. So
Yeah.
could we see a little more Sense of Slaughter after this at the Crockett Cup?
Yeah, I definitely think you will. I mean, Danny and I have had conversations, and obviously we both have our individual schedules, but we'd like to be able to make it work and be able to bring Scent to Slaughter to more places. And if the opportunity arises, we'd love to entertain that. I think we bring a fresh and unique style to tag team wrestling, not just with our years of experience individually, combining it, but just with our looks and the way that our styles are. We bring a very smash mouth, in your face style that you don't see a lot. And no offense to any other tag team out there, but we're two grown ass men that love to fight.
No, and again, that was something where I feel like it fits so perfectly when you think of the history of the Crockett Cup and who's
Yeah.
been the who's have been in there. Just when you look at it, to see you guys get announced, it was great to see. It just makes sense when you're thinking about, especially the teams that could fit in the caliber of the Crockett Cup. It was great to see you guys because I feel like it fit like a glove. It was perfect to see
I
your styles going into there. So
I appreciate that. Yeah, and like I said earlier, it was a great opportunity. We got great feedback from those that were in charge, and we just keep on rocking. You never know what's going to happen.
there you go. Awesome. So now, speaking of that style, and speaking of the the style that you bring to the ring, I now want
Mhm.
to ask, what is the Messiah of old school? Can you break that down a little bit for us? And
Sure.
where did that moniker come from?
Yeah, so I don't want to say I was floundering in like 26 or 2016 or 2017, but I felt like I was in a little bit of a rut, and I felt like the current iteration of Shawn Donavan had run its course, and I was looking to really just completely switch up the character. And for the first 15 years of my career, I always wore long pants, and only white boots. For 15 years, I always had a flashy, colorful side, which, to be honest, was never really me. But again, as we come up through the industry, a lot of us, you try different iterations until you find what sticks. But again, I go back to Danny Moff. I give him, credit there. He is the one that said, why don't you try wearing trunks? And I always, like many other wrestlers in our industry that suffer from bouts of body dysmorphia, we don't think that we look the right way or the certain way. And I always thought my legs were small, even though they're strong. If you see some people around, they're built with tree trunk legs, and I always felt like my legs were small, so I always shied away from wearing trunks. I took his advice, and I ordered a pair of just basic trunks and with knee pads and boots, and really changed up my style and really just bring it back to an old school smash mouth style from the guys that I grew up watching, like Stan Hansen and Terry Funk and things of that nature. And that's kind of where my style kind of got reborn from, and the look kind of got reborn from. And it went through a couple of iterations to what it is now. But the name really came from just joking around in the car and stuff like that. Again, I bring it to my buddies Falaba and Danny Moff and Justin Carino, where we were all driving in a car, and they would see me. And again, I said earlier, I'm not on social media much, these days as I used to be. And back, even a couple of years ago, I was on my phone like 24/7. And I don't remember offhand if it was Falaba or if it was Moff, but they were saying in the car, oh, Donovan or Dips is, one of my nicknames is, oh,
Yeah.
he's the messiah of social media, or he's the messiah of this or messiah of that. And I think, one day, I was watching old clips of stuff, because I tend to study the old stuff. I don't really tend to study a lot of the new stuff today, because I'm always looking for different ways to stand out with my work. And I think it was Moff who had said, why don't you just call yourself the messiah of old school? And that was all just came from joking around. And sometimes that's where the ideas come from the most, is when you're joking around and things of that nature. And I thought to myself, it's a pretty interesting nickname, let me dig into that a little bit. And, before that, I was calling myself the Genuine Article, which was kind of like an iteration of the character now. But that's where the Messiah of Old School came from. And it's kind of stuck. And I've evolved the character to where it is now, with some different looks, updated ring jackets, but still keeping that old school style feel to my gear. My gear is not flashy. It doesn't have any sequins on it. It's just basic old school, with old school logos on it and things of that nature. And that's, where the Messiah of Old School came from. And the iteration of the character really just came from the fact that while I love how the industry has evolved, I think sometimes it's evolved into some things that, for me, when I watch matches, I just can't get into. And I want to bring wrestling back to that old school way that it used to be, that NWA style, that realistic, hard-hitting smash mouth style, mixed with that early 90s All Japan style, where it was just guys going at it and just beating the holy hell out of one another, and just really mixing it up. That's, my character. So it's easy to play on when you have some of the new school guys that are around, and they're doing all these incredible acrobatic feats. If you combine my style with theirs, well, now we can really tell a fun, easy story.
Yeah, that's definitely, it adds to that element now of the contrast works so well, because they're working
Mhm.
around this, but hey, now you're bringing that realism back into it. That's that
Yep.
true just fight style to a match would definitely it's very entertaining to see, because it now brings that true fight of, hey, this is what I bring, and it brings
Right.
that, oh, this is what we're used to and what we saw, to the evolution of what we're seeing now in wrestling. So that's great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and for me, it brings out my true personality, because I can take the real feelings that I have and I can weave that into stories. Because that, to me,
Right.
is what I lacking the most in a lot of professional wrestling now, especially on the independents. In certain cases, it lacks some of the realism, and I think we need to get back to some of those basics and fundamentals, and get real again.
Gotcha. No, definitely, I can agree with that, and I feel like that's what work why it makes it work so well, and this is why we're here and having this conversation, because it's not even, I called it a moniker, but I feel like it defines perfectly. It's not even playing a character here; it's more of just showing a different side, if you will, almost.
Yeah, and one of the things that I take from that is, if anyone's ever heard of what's called an elevator pitch, a lot of times that's what I try to talk to some of our students about, and other individuals that ask me for advice. And I ask them, okay, well, what's your elevator pitch on your character? And usually an elevator pitch is really just tell me about yourself in like 30 seconds. And I've always said that if you can't define what your character or what your persona is in 30 seconds or less, then maybe you have to figure out what that character really is. Because it shouldn't be complicated to explain what your persona or what your character is to
Yeah,
someone if they
definitely,
don't understand what it is.
definitely, because you want to make sure, again, if you can't fully explain it or understand what you're doing, then the person you're
How's it
telling
going
it
to
to are
translate
not
to
going to
the
be able to.
audience?
Yeah, it's
Right.
definitely something where you want to make sure you know who you are before you're trying to say, so yeah, this is who I am. Like, you want to be able to explain that fully in order for it to even resonate with the crowd and with the fan base as well.
There it
So
is.
perfect. So from that, there was one name you mentioned there that I should have taken one of the pictures, but I should have screenshotted that. My apologies. But there's one person that gear wise I saw that definitely
Mhm.
shows their inspiration was there. And you
Mhm.
mentioned him, Terry Funk. How
Yep.
important was Terry Funk, especially with not only your style, but also with just who Shawn Donovan is in professional wrestling?
Huge. It's funny, again, watching wrestling growing up as a kid. Terry Funk to me was incredible, and as a kid, for some reason, I always gravitated more to the villains. Don't know why. Maybe that's just me and my personality, of being a villain. But Terry Funk really stuck to me, because he was this outlandish character that I didn't realize it at the time as a kid, but growing up and studying his work, he just had so many layers to him. And I consider Terry Funk the GOAT, in my opinion, because he was able to not just stay relevant, he was able to transcend every decade in a different way for over 40 years. And when you think about that, how many performers in our industry can have a 40-year career or even a 50-year career still wrestling, and still having notable stories and notable feuds? I can't think of very many. But, for 50 years, Terry Funk continued to transcend and make himself relevant and valuable in every decade that he was a part of. To me, that's why I think he is the GOAT of pro wrestling. But very valuable to me because I've taken a lot from his career and taken a lot of and studied a lot of his work and then applied a lot of what he has done in my work and switched it around and made it work for me. Whether it's something that he would do from a selling aspect or something that he would do from a character perspective. And just being, over the top with that. And to me, that's what Terry Funk has meant to to me in my career. And I'm still studying his stuff. Even, I can watch his promos over and over and over again and find something different that I can take from. The same with his matches. So he's definitely one of my go-tos of studying. The gear idea was a tribute, to him and what he's done, for me and helping reevaluate my career and my in-ring style. So, I love that aspect.
Gotcha. And there's one more name, especially you mentioned him earlier, getting to meet him, and then I saw recently, you were able to even induct him into a Hall of Fame. I want to mention the name Chris Candido. What does
Yeah.
that mean to you?
Oh, tremendous. Chris was one of my early mentors. Back when I was training at the school that I came up in, him and Balls Mahoney used to come up to the school, and train with us at least 2 or 3 times a month in my early part of my career. And he was such a breath of fresh air to be around because while we all had the same trainer at that school, he would always come and lend his knowledge and he would bring a different way of looking at the industry to us. I mean, he would not only just get in the ring with all of us at training and work with us on the fly, which working on the fly is incredible feat to learn in our industry, but he was such a master at it. But then he would just sit around for hours and he would talk to us. Sometimes class would end at 10:30. We would still be there at 1 a.m. just listening to him talk and tell stories. And one of the things that I always got from Chris, one of the big things that he always taught me was, the phrase of, don't take yourself seriously, take what you do inside the ring seriously. And if you think about that from Chris's perspective, the way that he portrayed himself as a character, he never took himself seriously. And I think that's what made him an incredible performer, because what he did in the ring, he took very seriously. He was an incredibly underrated talent. And, getting to be in locker rooms with him, the early part of my career, was incredible. To then fast forward to 2023 and be able to play a part in inducting him into the ISPW Hall of Fame was a pretty cool thing. Kind of full
Oh,
circle
definitely.
moment.
That I can imagine. I was about to say, and it's a perfect just storybook there. Getting to do something like that in full, just storytelling, amazing right there. Just being able to have that inspiration, get to learn from him, and then induct him into the Hall of Fame there. And I feel like those two names definitely show that inspiration shows through not only what you do in the ring, but just again the character as a whole. You could
I
see those
appreciate
little
that.
nuances in that. So that's great.
Thank you. I
So
appreciate that.
no, definitely. So now I do want to pick your brain on this about, again, we've talked about you as a character, we talked about you in the ring. So now, and especially with you as a trainer as well, who are you looking at currently and saying, I need to get into a ring with them? Like, is there a certain talent? Is there someone that you're looking at like, yeah, we have to make this match happen?
Yeah, there is a plethora of talent that is out there, especially in the tri-state area. When I think about it outside the tri-state area and I see them on some different shows, one guy I'm impressed with is an individual by the name of Starboy Charlie, who I think
Okay.
that our clash of styles would be really cool. Um, Guys that are within the tri-state area, man, there's so many. But if I can just pinpoint two off the top of my brain, and I've only one I'll mention first. I've only worked him in a tag match before, but it's working with one half of the Iron Savages in Bronson. Um,
Okay.
Great guy. He brings the same kind of smash mouth style that I do. That I would love to be able to get in a ring and work with him one on one. And then if the other name off the top of my head, because there's just so many talented performers that are out there that it's hard for me to mention, everybody. And I'll try to think of them off the top of my head a little bit. But one person I have yet to get in the ring with that I'm surprised no one has made the match yet is myself versus Darius Carter.
I am so glad you said that, because that was the one name I was about to say, that I feel
Uh,
like the promos and just the story you guys would tell
yeah,
alone, without even
would be a
touching,
lot of fun.
would be great.
Yeah, it would be a
Which
lot
I'm
of fun.
hoping Pete is still in the
Yeah,
chat, because I feel like he's now writing this idea down. So
right. Yeah, definitely. He's definitely one name off the top of my list that I've always wanted to get in the ring with and be able to see how our styles can really come together and provide something entertaining for the fan base is definitely something that's has yet to be done. So those are two names off the top of my head, but there's a plethora of talent throughout the independent circuit. When I look at guys from our sister school in New York, I would love to get in the ring with a Bobby Orlando. Um, also would love to get in the ring with even with Danny Moff teaming. I'd love to get in the ring with Waves and Curls. And be able to work with them as in a tag team capacity. So there's just so much talent out there that I would love to work with that I have yet to work with. So, like I said, only time will tell, and we'll see where it goes.
gotcha. No, and then that I was about to ask that as well. Is tag wise, is there anyone you're looking at? But definitely that match, Waves and Curls, I feel like would be a perfect, just to now even the odds there, especially with the match that Mauve had recently at NEW that
Mm-hmm.
featured one of the members as well. That was a true, just I feel like it almost went an hour as well. So that would be a great
Yeah,
match to
and I
see all
remember
four of you guys in there.
yeah, and you talk about feedback too. I mean, again, Moff and I texting back and forth. He sends me his matches, and I'll continue to watch them, and we will always talk about what we thought went right, what we thought could have been done better, and we're always just again same thing. He's not afraid to take advice from me. I'm certainly not afraid to take advice from him. And that's what makes teams better, but that's also what makes performers better as a whole is getting to pick apart matches with the people that you trust and be able to talk about it in a professional manner and say, hey man, maybe I would have done this here, or maybe I would have done this here, or maybe I wouldn't have done this at all. It's all different flavors of ice cream, and that's one thing that one of my other mentors, Dr. Tom Pritchard, taught me is that it's all ice cream. It's just different flavors. There's not necessarily one right or wrong way to do something. At the end of the day, if it gets a reaction from the crowd, you're doing something right.
That's perfect. I love that. Again, another phrase I love to always say about the business as well, because it goes that way. It's one of those where there is so many styles of it, so many ways that again, as long as it's being done, that there is something coming out of it. That's great. So
Absolutely.
that's awesome. But again, Mr. Donovan, I don't want to take up too much more of your time here. So I have one
Yeah.
final question I do want to ask. So for the
Shoot.
Messiah of Old School, for Shawn Donovan, what is
Mhm.
the end goal?
I'm sorry, what is the what?
What is the end goal?
I think the end goal for me at this point in my career is just to continue to have as much longevity as I possibly can to still be able to strive for different opportunities that come through me. And whether that's going to be for an in-ring role or a behind the scenes role, who knows? But I want to continue that longevity for me. As I mentioned, before, at some point the bump card is going to fill up for Shawn Donavan, and at that point, it's time to move on to something else. But I'm always going to stay involved in the industry because I love it that much. I would love for it to be in a coaching or a producer type role someday. You never know. But at the end of the day, I absolutely love what I'm doing now, and I don't see an end goal in sight. So I'm just going to keep on keeping on every day.
Perfect. And again, love to hear it. Mr. Donovan, thank you again for joining us. For everyone watching, please don't forget to go follow Shawn Donavan on his social media. Follow him there on Instagram, Shawn Donavan01. Follow him on Twitter so you can get those amazing tips as well at Shawn Donavan01 right there. And also, like we mentioned earlier, go see him on July 22nd facing Yosifer L. As announced earlier today, WrestlePro making their return to Rahway on September 17th. Also, check them out at We Are Wrestling on September 8th at Deja Vu. So, Mr. Donovan, thank you so much again. This has truly been a pleasure. And I definitely think we're going to have to eventually do a part two because I feel like there's so much more I want to ask. But again, I want to be respectful of your time as well.
I am always down for round two whenever you want. Just reach out. We'll set a date and we'll talk shop.
Thank you again. We'll definitely will. And guys, for everyone watching, thank you so much again. As always, don't forget to be wise, be genuine, be real, be better people, respect the craft, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.